At sunrise, the Colosseum was already awake. The archers drank in pale light, while yesterday's blood hardened into sand. Vendors called. Cages clanked. From the tunnels came the metallic chime of blades. Not training, but rehearsal for real killing. Above it all, the crowd gathered like a tide. Not for sport, but for spectacle shaped by power. What you are about to see, in ancient myth or dramatic flourish, it's a system, engineered cruelty, staged by emperors who turned suffering into statecraft. Stay with me. By the end, you'll ask whether a civilization that applauds cruelty can survive it. The Roman arena, the image everyone knows. Helmets, sand, a duel to the death. But the truth is darker and far more intentional. The games began as ritual and ended as political theater. Funerals turned into fights, prisoners rebranded into myth, and animals became trophies and props. This episode cracks open the mechanics behind the spectacle, how the game shaped public loyalty, erased empathy, and served as a blunt instrument of imperial control. We'll trace 3 lines: origin and ritual, escalation and spectacle, and the long, cultural cost to people, to species, and to the soul of a republic turned empire. Expect cruelty, expect engineering, expect propaganda disguised as entertainment. This is history stripped raw. To understand Roman games, start at a funeral. In the early republic, aristocratic families honored the dead in varied ways. One passage of tradition became public combat. Paired fighters, often slaves, matched in private rites to commemorate a fallen father. That blood ritual didn't stay private. As Rome expanded and absorbed neighbors, foreign customs blended into Roman life. Samnite shield patterns, Thracian blades, Gallic helmets, and with them, the logic of combat and display. The transition matters because it flips the intention. A private ritual about the dead, a public spectacle about the living. State power realized this quickly. A fight in an amphitheater could be staged as piety while serving a political end, distraction in times of unrest, a reward to the people, a statement of dominance. When gladiators wore the armor of conquered peoples, their defeat became a reenactment of imperial victory. Watching a man in Gaul-style helms fall meant replaying Rome's conquest in the mind of the spectator. The arena became a repeating reel of empire. By the late Republic, transient wooden stands gave way to permanent amphitheaters. Investments followed. Senators and emperors funded games to buy goodwill. Bread and circuses wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. And the crowd learned how to read meaning in the spectacle. Cheering could be harnessed. Ruling through applause was cheaper than ruling through forced labor. Once spectacle became statecraft, escalation was inevitable. Novelty sells. Officials chased the next shock. Animals once exotic were not displayed to marvel, they were degraded into prey. The Romans staged venations, hunts inside the arena. Lions, leopards, crocodiles, even giraffes were hauled across deserts and rivers so the city could watch them die. Consider logistics for a moment. Capturing a lion in North Africa, keeping it alive through months of transport, intentionally weakening it so the crowd would see a dramatic kill. This is industrial cruelty. Archaeological finds back this up. Bones marked by starvation, remains showing broken limbs before death. Evidence animals were prepared for spectacle. Then came the rigging. Fights were manipulated, weighted armor, nets designed to trip, rules skewed to favor dramatic collapse. Sometimes an emperor himself staged triumph by guaranteeing his victory, maiming animals or positioning favored gladiators. It wasn't fair combat. It was theater scripted by those in power. But the cruelty was not merely for shock. It had active political functions. Public executions disguised as drama, damnatio ad bestias, burning as theatrical punishment, mock naval battles where captives fought and drowned, were messages. They said, "We can humiliate nature. We can humiliate you. Power is complete." The spectacle normalized brutality. Children grew up on it. Citizens learned to equate civic life with spectacle-fed obedience. Empires that manufacture consensus through shared cruelty are building a brittle civic identity. A few contemporary observers protested. Philosophers like Seneca warned that mass cruelty hardens souls. and some priests were coiled. But critics were drowned out when emperors used games to buy loyalty or distract from political failure. The more the state gave in spectacle, the more the state demanded spectacle. Contemporary accounts describe vast spectacles, gladiatorial combats, beast hunts, and dramatic executions. Some reports, likely exaggerated, claim thousands of animals were killed. Whether exact numbers are accurate matters less than the message. The games were an assertion of imperial resources. If you can stage mass death as entertainment, you have surplus wealth and organizational reach, and you communicate that to the populace. These weren't model ships. They were water theaters filled with captives on real vessels. The stage became a death trap. Arrows, boarding, sinking. The Naumachia rewrote geography. Rome engineered seas where none existed, showing it could control even the elements. Prisoners forced into role-played myths, Orpheus mauled by beasts, or inventors thrown from crude contraptions, transformed punishment into narrative humiliation. It wasn't only death, it was performance. People didn't merely die, they performed an empire's moral, defy state or be turned into a lesson. Evidence indicates animals were starved, chained, or maimed, so the crowd would get a predictable performance. Handlers practiced control techniques, and the whole supply chain, catch, transport, holding pens, feeding schedules, became part of the stagecraft. That is chilling because it shows cruelty embedded in infrastructure rather than occasional excess. Between these mechanics and the images of emperors as actors, Commodus playing Hercules, emperors hunting by torchlight, you see why the games weren't accidental. They were a tool of identity manufacturing, myth-making through violence. What did Rome lose in the applause? First, an ecological footprint. Chroniclers and later scholars note declines in wild populations: lions, leopards, elephants removed from ecosystems to feed entertainment. The arena was an ecological wrecking ball that exported local extinction as imperial trophy. Second, a moral corrosion. When public life centers on normalized cruelty, empathy atrophies. Seneca and others warned that routine exposure to executions hardened citizens. Civic life starts to resemble the games: spectacle over substance, instant satisfaction over deliberation. That's dangerous in practice. It makes populations easier to distract and control. Third, political cost. Emperors who relied on spectacle sometimes used it in place of governance. When bread and circuses replace institutions that solve real problems, the state grows brittle. The late empire saw resource drain, debt, and spectacle-driven policy choices that weakened Rome structurally. Finally, legacy. The Colosseum endures as a ruin tourists admire. But ruins don't erase function. The stones still ask the same question: what does a society do when it celebrates suffering? The answer is written in the Arc of Rome, a civilization that expanded through mastery of violence and then stumbled under the weight of its own spectacle. The arena was more than gladiators and banners. It was a civic machine, logistics, theater, ritual, and policy fused into a daily school of cruelty. The lessons Rome taught in sand were clear. Power performs itself through spectacle, and a people who cheer cruelty risk losing what makes a society humane. We still live with echoes of those lessons. When spectacle replaces debate and public fury becomes entertainment, we inch toward a similar corrosion. Which Roman spectacle most shocked you? The hunts, the mythic executions, the Naumachia, or emperors turned actors? Drop your thoughts below. If this descent into history's shadows gripped you, subscribe to Grim History and hit the bell. More hidden horrors await. Until next time, walk those ruins with your eyes open. The stones remember. The Colosseum's opening games under Titus are reported by ancient sources as massive displays: gladiators, Venetians, and Naumachia. Ancient writers claim thousands of animals were killed. The numbers may be inflated, but the scale was unmistakable. Titus used the games as imperial theater, the spectacle of abundance and power. Commodus late 2nd century. Emperor as gladiator, Commodus staged himself a heroic fighter, often rigging conditions to his favor. He fought in the arena, declared victories, and demanded adulation. Commodus's actions fused ruler and spectacle. His ego turned the public ritual into personal branding and further normalized the entertainment of cruelty. Nero and Caligula, the mad pageant. Nero staged naumachia and even ordered citizens into the arena in extremes. Caligula reportedly kidnapped spectators for use in games. Whether the most lurid accounts are true, ancient historians often love scandal. They reveal the narrative. Emperors could weaponize spectacles to terrify or amuse on demand. Trajan and the mega-festivals. Trajan's triumphal games after military victories reportedly lasted months and killed untold numbers of captives. These massive festivals functioned as imperial advertisements. Look at Rome's resources, its men, and its control. The spectacle reassured or intimidated, depending on perspective. Each epoch used the arena differently, but the central logic remained. Spectacle served as message and mortar of empire. When emperors performed, or coerced, spectacle, the audience consumed a carefully curated lesson in obedience and awe. Seneca warned that routine exposure to executions eroded compassion. He argued cruelty normalized cruelty. A citizen who expected spectacle could be a citizen who expected obedience. Pliny the Elder recorded species declines caused by hunts and lamented the ecological toll. Cicero and other moralists criticized spectacles as hollow substitutes for virtue. Early Christian writers recast the arena as persecution, martyrdom in the face of public spectacle. For communities targeted by public executions, the arena was not entertainment, but trauma. Martyr accounts shaped later memory and moral condemnation of the games. These critics matter because they show awareness. The games were not universally accepted as harmless fun. They were contested, debated, and politicized. The existence of dissent undermines the narrative that spectacles were simple pleasures. They were political tools and moral tests, and some contemporaries saw the corrosion, ecological, chronicling of species loss appears in ancient texts. Lions and leopards were hunted into scarcity. The Roman appetite for exotic beasts reshaped ecosystems far from the city. The arena was an engine of biological extraction, psychological, habitual spectacle blunted empathy. Communities raised on blood learned to expect, then demand, escalating entertainment. Philosophers worried that moral imagination dimmed when suffering became show. Political and economic, games consumed resources. Emperors spent fortunes to secure favor. Extravagance sometimes led to fiscal strain. Bread and circuses substituted for governance. Spectacle masked policy failures and fostered dependency on imperial largesse. Over time, reliance on spectacle made the state vulnerable to fiscal shocks and political theatrics. Cultural legacy. The arenas normalized spectacle as civic ritual. Over centuries, the practice reshaped Roman identity, from a republic of civic virtue to an empire where power performed itself. The long-term cultural cost is hard to quantify, but visible in accounts of late Roman decay. Political theater replaced institutional robustness. By the late empire, arenas fell silent, some due to economic strain, others to changing religious and political values. The rise of Christianity reframed public morality about spectacle. The Colosseum became, over time, not only a ruin, but a moral prompt. How does a civilization reckon with its past? Today tourists admire the stone and architecture. Plaques tell of engineering genius. But the stones also keep a darker record. Walk its tunnels and you'll hear echoes, not factual replays, but moral questions. The place asks us, what happens when entertainment eclipses human dignity? Rome's ruins are a warning and a mirror. The arena was more than spectacle. It was a civic technology, logistics, narrative control, and ritualized violence combined into a machine of domination. Rome taught its citizens to interpret cruelty as regular, if not glorious. That normalization is the real horror, not only the deaths, but the culture that applauded them. Today, the echo persists wherever cruelty is packaged as entertainment, where spectacle substitutes for accountability, or where empathy is traded for a cheap thrill. Which part of Rome's arena most troubled you? The hunts, the contrived combat, the mythic executions, or the emperors who made themselves stars? Tell us below. If you want more of history's hidden horrors, subscribe to Grim History. Walk ruins with your eyes open. The past is teaching, whether we listen or not.